Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. This is Amateur Hour with Amateur Exegete. Introduce yourself.
Hey, how are you
Hello,
guys?
it's nice. It's nice getting to see you.
Yeah.
You don't get to see you from the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I
Waiting to
hide
have
behind the Twitter.
have this for a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple months, maybe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Many holidays.
I know my friend over here, he's been wanting to have this conversation with you guys for a while.
Okay.
So, you know,
Noticed you on
Uh,
Jackson's channel the other day.
Yeah. Over at Jackson Wheat. Yeah.
Yeah, we had him here before.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I didn't know that. All right.
yeah, the weedy
All right.
man.
First things first, tell the dear audience about your background and how you ended up doing whatever it is you do.
Yeah. So I grew up a King James only dispensational young Earth creationist.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Me too. So I believed that for probably too much into my 20s, and then slowly made the shift first out of King James onlyism and dispensationalism, and then into Reformed theology, so Calvinism and evangelicalism.
I'm sorry again.
Yeah. And then, of course, eventually into a kind of theistic evolution.
That would be like, I'm trying to think of his name, Ross.
Well, Hugh's not a theistic evolutionist. He denies evolution, but he does believe in an old Earth.
Right.
Yeah. So I moved to that, and then I don't know. A few years after that, eventually I became an atheist. I just made that rather not so lateral move, from belief to unbelief. But that's it in a nutshell. I've talked about some of that in my blog, so
Tell us how that happened.
Yeah. So, without getting into too much mud, too much detail, I had gone through a pretty it was a pretty rough time. I was 29 years old, so it was about 2012, and it started to make me question what I had believed. So I started exploring my faith more, and I fully expected to come out of this crisis, I guess is what you can call it, with my faith intact. I had a similar crisis at 17 and emerged from that an even stronger Christian. So I thought, oh, well, surely I'll come out of this an even stronger Christian. That's not what happened. It's not because of some of the atheist material I read. The first book I read as I was making my way into atheism was Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. And it immediately turned me off. I can just remember that it was I didn't care for it. So I still really wanted that faith. I wanted that belief in Christ. And so I dove into William Lane Craig's stuff a lot more. And really, the more I listened to him, the more I engaged with his material, the more I thought, I just can't buy into this. This does not work for me. The arguments to me didn't hold up all that well. And I said, I don't think there is a God. I can't be dogmatic about that because I can't know everything, but it just seemed to me that the universe made more sense without a God, at least the God of Christianity, than with it. So I mean that's the short answer. There's a longer one that I probably could go on and on about, but
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I do get how the deep conversions or whatever conversions, however people want to prefer it. I know that it does get really personal, so I can understand not wanting to go in length about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of detailing that some on the blog, and like I just wrote a recent post, and I really it took me a long time to write that post. It was probably 3 months in writing it because I just did not know. I didn't know how to say things, and that post wasn't even about coming to atheism. I was still a Christian in that post. So there's a lot of retrospect I'm even doing now in my life, taking into stock things and just rethinking through things. So it's, we're all on a journey. That's the way I see it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, in our experiences, we've seen that many internet atheists are remarkably similar to fundagelicals in their understanding of the Bible and theology, and thus both extremes aren't cultured enough to appreciate such things. Like, doesn't that sort of depress you?
Oh yeah, one of the things that really, well, like you said, they tend to read the Bible in a fundamentalist fashion, and on one level you can't blame them because it's what they were taught, it's what they know. So when you only work with what you know, you're gonna lash out in a way that reflects that. So my joy, I guess is what you could say, is to kind of present the Bible in a way that's more palatable, more scholarly, even though I'm not a scholar, in a way that even, so that atheists can kind of see, well, there's other ways of looking at the Bible besides this hard-nosed, young Earth creation style sort of nonsense,
Well, yeah. I always found it funny because this is what another person we've had on named Joel Edmund Anderson.
Yeah.
And what was funny about him is that he actually, in his blog, when he was going over, like, I forget which review he did it under, but it was under this review of Jerry Coyne's book.
Oh, faith versus fact, or whatever it was called.
Yeah, I think so. And what was the most funniest thing about the post to me was that he put up 2 quotes, one from Ken Ham and one from Jerry Coyne, and just said to pick which one. And like, I admit I got it wrong.
Well, that's depressing. That's very.
Because I had thought that one of them was, because he had posted, like, I think it was maybe 2 to 4 quotes, and I was like, all right, this has to be Ken Ham, and then I said, oh no, that was Coyne. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah,
I love that piece when he compared Carrier to Ken Ham and Cheese.
That was funny. I would say you're probably in the best position with it because you actually did go through the fundamentalist phase of yourself as well.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit more experience, like, when how atheists see the Bible anyway.
Yeah, and when I first came into atheism, I did kind of have that new atheist phase where I was like, I felt like I'd been lied to all these years, and so you kind of have this anger that builds up, and it took a little while for me to work that out. And looking back, it's a little embarrassing, but I can kind of sympathize with atheists that are just coming into it and have that fervor and that passionate, but when you've been in atheism for like 5-10 years, that probably should start to wane a little bit, So I can forgive it to a point because when I first became a Christian, I was 9 years old, and I had this zeal, like I just wanted to tell everybody, and I made mistakes. I just, as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid, you just make mistakes. So there's this zeal, but like the Bible talks about, I think it's in one of the Pauline epistles, it's a zeal without knowledge. So I think a lot of atheists go through that phase. I went through that phase, but after some time, you kind of grow out of it. So.
Well, yeah, I think what happens with many atheists is that they play a character for so long. Like, I think with a guy like Aaron Ra, who's been doing this for 20 years, it would be just unheard of if he just all of a sudden just changed everything.
Yeah, and some of it is just you get stuck in a rut.
Because I think if he really delved into the scholarly literature and that actually changed his mind on a few things, I think it'd be hard for him to just go back on everything he said for 20 years.
Yeah. At least for the Bible, yeah.
And the funny thing is that he targets Christianity when he was raised a Mormon.
Oh, I didn't know he was raised a Mormon.
Well, he says that he was raised Mormon, but he never really, sort of considered himself part of it. He said he was raised a Christian and he came from a Mormon family, but he never really could identify himself as a Mormon.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could buy that, but I just didn't know about any kind of Mormon background. That's interesting.
Yeah, I remember he had talked about it in an interview that he did with, I know he's talked about it before with many people, but the one I listened to was when he said it with Kent Hovind, where he went into it, said, yeah, he had a Mormon background, but he never really considered himself part of it because his Mormon family were pretty much just Christians. They just happened to go to a Mormon church.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Well,
either way, his childhood was fucked up, to say the least.
Well, yeah, that's rough.
Well, I mean, if you grow up looking like Genghis Khan, that's going to happen. Something happened down the line.
He does have a unique look. That is for sure.
Or the Undertaker meets Attila the Hun.
Yeah, I think the Undertaker is probably a better. Oh yeah, he does. I love the Undertaker too, man.
Yeah.
I love him too. He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But as an atheist who comes in good faith, what do you make of the new atheists / anti-theists, fundy atheists, whatever they want to call themselves?
Yeah. So, so like I said before, I can sympathize with a lot of what they say. To a point. There's man, this is really hard to kind of nail down. I can see where, especially like in American culture, where the religious right has kind of wedged their way into politics, and it's become really gross. I can see where there's kind of this militant atheism, like we need to get religion out of government and out of society. I can sympathize with it, but I think the mistake they make is going to the extreme of calling Christians or any kind of theist deluded, or any kind of trying to stamp on them some kind of mental health issue associated with believing that God exists. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think people are deluded when they claim to believe in God. Some might be, but I think most people that believe in God do so in good faith. I think generally they probably have decent reasons, some better than others. Some are, believe in God because it's how they were raised, but there's some thoughtful Christians out there. I mean, Cameron over at Capturing Christianity. I think Michael Jones, Inspiring Philosophy. Eric Manning, who does Is Jesus Alive? These are people who I think have a genuine belief in God, and I think they have good reasons for that belief. Whether I agree with them or not is another matter, but I think they have good reasons.
And our mutual friends on Twitter, Biblical Historical Context and Ordo Apchow.
Yep.
I mean, well, the question is Jesus alive? Well, he was, some 2,000 odd years ago. I think that's gone past it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he was alive, and I think he's a little bit dead now, but that's okay. I still like him.
I also noticed you're against Christ mythers, and rightly so. Like, how do you view Yeshua himself?
So for me, the historical Jesus, I'm in line with people like Bart Ehrman, Paula Fredrickson, who see him as a apocalyptic prophet who was perhaps a disciple or some kind of an associate of John the Baptist. And so he preached in Galilee, probably went up to Jerusalem frequently, and then in his 33rd year or whatever, he made a trip to Passover. He was lauded as Messiah, and Pilate decided to have him killed to, prevent any kind of insurrection. And so I think, I think he clearly existed. I just have no doubt about that. But I just don't think he was the miracle working Son of God that Christians think of him.
Well, I always put it the funny way is like people say, do you believe Jesus was the Son of God? I'm saying, well, in Jewish culture at the time, to be a son of God was to be a Jew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, the moniker "Son of God" is taken by Christians to mean the son of a like the literal son of a deity, or in the sense of like what the Book of John talks about. He's in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. So, but yeah, you're right. In first century in Second Temple Judaism, a son of God was a Jew. A son of God could be the Davidic Messiah. There's different ways or different things that son of God could mean that did not necessarily entail he was divine. And I think this is how the Synoptics understand it.
Christ Smithers love this theory that that because Augustus Caesar was called son of God, that they copied off of him, but that's not really the case. He was the son of the god Julius Caesar. Forgot how you pronounce it in Latin, but
yeah, he was the adopted son, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Augustus was the adopted son, and in Roman culture, the adopted son was the one who inherited.
Yeah. And then they said he was the divine son of the god because Julius was deified upon his death.
Yeah, which isn't anything like what happens in the New Testament. This is an entirely different animal altogether, So yeah, I think it's Chris Hansen who wrote a post about parallelomania.
Yeah,
they see parallels everywhere, so therefore it must be that Jesus was, and no, that's not how it works. That's not the case. So
you ever want to thoroughly debunk that? Just to any nutty Christ Smither, that level of Christ Smither who comes to you, just link them to Inspiring Philosophy series on it. He goes through every single demigod that they compare Jesus to.
Yeah, Horus and all those. Yeah,
Krishna,
That's the funniest person to actually compare Jesus to, because when you actually read the stories, it's like I don't know a single Egyptologist that would ever make that comparison.
Yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. The background literature for the New Testament images of Jesus is clearly the Hebrew Bible. That's the background. The background isn't all these other. I mean, undoubtedly there's some influence, but it's so minor compared to how the gospel writers were influenced by the Septuagint. And if you miss that, you've missed everything. Now, mythicists will go to the extreme and say, well, see, all these stories are from the Old Testament, so none of it happened. All of it's fake, And I think it's Martin Goodacre who said the Gospels are a history scripturized. That it's this idea that they've taken snippets of history and use scripture to frame it. I think that's probably right. For the most part. I mean, there's obvious embellishments, but I think that's for the most part correct.
And there's the other line of Christ mythers who even reject that zeitgeist comparisons and will point to these other demigods and say, see, he wasn't compared to those gods, he was compared to these gods.
Yeah, it's perplexing. And that's not to say that all Christ mythers are, wackadoodles or deluded, as some atheists would call Christians. I just think, there's some very sincere mythicists that I've talked to, and they have really very interesting arguments, and I've had some good conversations. I just don't,
for the most part, it's almost entirely emotional position, kind of like younger creationism.
Yeah, it tends. Yeah, I think to some degree, I think it does tend, at least on a very popular level, it certainly is, because the arguments that you can get into get very heated very quick, and that, to me, reeks of fundamentalism. So, yeah.
I think the thing is that many atheists, mythicism was their gateway into atheism. So, that's what O'Neill said. He had 2 or 3 atheists actually come to him, through emails, and it told him that what made them, that they were hesitant to take his view because they were worried that if they accepted Jesus existed, that would invalidate their atheism, because that's how they came to it to begin with.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that because for me, that I hadn't even encountered mythicism until after I was already an atheist. Part of that is just because when you are in the midst of, well, I was doing youth ministry, so in the South, so those issues never come up. The more common issues that came up for me were, hey, Dan Brown said this in the Da Vinci Code. What do you think about that? Or I mean, seriously, I think frequently that kind of crap came up. So the apologetic that I had built was more geared toward those issues, and mythicism. I wouldn't have. I've never heard of it. I'd never heard of Richard Carrier, Robert Price. Those not until after I was an atheist.
You were lucky.
yeah, I was naive and lucky. Man, I miss those days.
Da Vinci Code makes a lot more sense than Carrier's hypothesis of the cosmic sperm bank.
Yeah. Oh man, his reading of Romans 1 I just
don't get it.
I mean, I mean, it's just so frustrating because he latches onto this one word, the sperma, but then he doesn't apply the same logic to it as he does to the other occurrences of it in the rest of Romans or even I think Galatians. I don't know. It's an inconsistent hermeneutic, that's for sure.
Just wait until he tries to explain it in his upcoming book, Jesus from Outer Space or whatever, that comes out on April Fool's of all days.
Oh wait, I thought it was coming out in September. Is it really April 1st?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
And here's the subtext: he came from outer space.
Oh,
And what I find especially funny is that while most atheists are Exodus mythicists by default, because the consensus is that the Exodus didn't happen the way it was described in the Bible, which they'll naturally jump to the conclusion it didn't happen at all. Yeah. Christ mythers will readily accept that while denying the consensus when it comes to Yeshua's existence.
Yeah, it does seem to be kind of a cherry picking. Although I maybe let me think about that because. It depends on how you evaluate the data. If you're a minimalist, then you're going to look at the data in a certain way and say, there's no good evidence to support it. And I think you could do that both with the Exodus and with the existence of Jesus. But I think there are other problems that creates. And well, I don't know. I'd have to think on that. That's interesting.
Like my position is that the historicity of the Exodus is like that of the Trojan War. Just like there probably was a Moses whose original name was probably Ra-Moses or something along those lines, like Egyptian in origin, and led some Canaanite Hebrews out to Mount Horeb somewhere in Midian or Arabia.
Yeah, and that because the book of Exodus seems really keen on making the name Moses mean something in Hebrew and not Egyptian, which kind of says, oh, maybe he originally was an Egyptian, or maybe he originally was some kind of, or he was born in Egypt and it was given an Egyptian name. But yeah, that's a good comparison with the Trojan War. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that, Brad?
Agnostic on it. I said I lean more agnostic on his existence. I mean, I have heard of
you're roboting.
Oh, keep talking. All right, this is better.
Yeah.
All right, this is probably my connection. I'm more agnostic on it. I mean, I've heard good arguments either way on it.
Yeah.
It's not like a big thing in my beliefs with it. If he did exist or did not exist, it really doesn't matter to me so much. But
well, it kind of does, since he's one of the most important and significant figures in the history of the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've also heard some, I've talked to some rabbis about it who have some scholarship in it. They have mentioned like how Moses went under different names, and I'm thinking there might be something to the idealization sort of theory where Moses was just a sort of he wasn't one figure per se, but he was multiple figures that were important in Jewish history, and they just sort of amalgamated him all into one character that we now know as Moses. I could buy that. That could be the case. I mean, either way, I think that it is an interesting topic to look into.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more comparable to Hercules. There probably was a guy like that, some Schwarzenegger-like bodybuilder in the late Bronze Age. He was really big and very strong, and killed the notorious lion that was causing trouble for everybody, and legends grew up around him.
Well, yeah.
It's possible.
It's also funny how I also hear Christians say, well, legends couldn't develop in such a short time after Jesus' death. I'm like, legends can develop within someone's own lifetime. Like, like Richard the Lionheart and Christopher Columbus. There was legends spreading about them while they were still alive.
Yeah. George Washington had some, some really interesting ones.
And Napoleon. Alexander, Genghis Khan.
Yep. That was the argument that William Lane Craig I made because I heard William Lane Craig made it, and it really made me facepalm because he had said that, the time span of the Gospels was too long, too short for it to be legendary. And I'm like, you do know in history, like, legends can develop within someone's own lifetime. They don't need a long span of time.
Yeah.
Like, Alexander the Great. Although that's probably not the best comparison, but I'm like, Richard the Lionheart would be Christopher Columbus. Like, those two had legends spread about them in their own lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it would not be impossible to think that a very, like, at least influential to his own people, developed legends around him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always just found that sort of thing funny.
So how do you view the Exodus yourself?
Yes. So I don't know. I lean toward there being a historical Exodus, but I like you. I think it was probably it must have been smaller than what the Bible describes. So I kind of lean toward Richard Elliott Friedman's view that it was the Levites who came out of Egypt for whatever reason. Maybe they were slaves. I don't know. But they left Egypt, came to Canaan, where they encountered these Canaanites that had confederated, which was ancient Israel, and merged with them, brought the worship of Yahweh to them. So you see the god El, Baal, some of their traits merging with Yahweh, who is this, kind of a warrior god. And that's when, the Jewish cult, the Israelite cult, really kind of came into its own, especially as it progressed toward, monotheistic understanding. Oh, I can't hear you. Did you mute?
Good.
Also the great god of thunder and storm.
Yeah. Well, especially when he merges with Baal. I mean, Baal is the storm god. He rides on the clouds in the Ugaritic literature, and this is exactly how Yahweh is described, as he rides on the clouds.
I've always figured that the warrior persona attributed to Yahweh was kind of based on Anat.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to Mark Smith talks about this in his book, and if I remember correctly, he goes through Anat, but he doesn't think there's very good comparisons with Anat in the biblical literature. But I could be wrong. I have to look it up.
Then there's also the wisdom figure in the Proverbs that was Asherah.
Yeah, Asherah. There's lots of references to her all over. It's often hidden by English translations. Sometimes rightfully so, because sometimes it's kind of subtle, and it's meant to be subtle. But yeah,
anyway, exactly. But anyway, back to the point that Moses led these Levites in particular, or just them, or others.
Yeah, so I would say it was probably just the Levites. It was a small band, not anywhere near 3 million people.
No, Absolutely not.
Yeah, but and there's and
you got that many millions of people living in one town in Egypt at that one time. They weren't slaves. They were there by a choice.
Yeah, they would be conquerors. Exactly. Yeah. It would take a miracle for them to be slaves. But yeah, exactly. It's just a ridiculous amount. But the reason that it's inflated is for polemical purposes. Is to say,
right.
God's been behind them. He's made them reproduce and become fruitful, and it's obviously there's theological and political.
And that's another point.
Like we even know when we look at really any ancient figure, like pre-modern times, we know that even the ancient Greeks had a habit of exaggerating the amount of numbers, they would say a ridiculous, like we had hundreds of thousands. I'm like, your entire population isn't even that much.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, it's not like the people back then they wanted to get the number of men that they had so down in the nitty-gritty, like they were counting 1, 2, 3. Like no, they had theological purpose and political purposes for doing it as well.
Yeah.
My favorite example of not modern, it's happened long ago, but it's modern in the sense of its media presence. The movie 300.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like they talk so much about the 300, but they never mention like the 1,000 other soldiers that were also there or more.
Yeah, they're kind of just glanced over briefly. Yeah.
They stand out because it's their small number during the final wave of the attack, if I remember correctly. I also love the movie Troy.
Oh, me too. Yeah, I love Troy. That's a good movie.
Yeah.
Although, and I do say it is actually pretty interesting when you actually go into how other cultures like the ancient Greeks and how ancient Hebrews, they had some similarities in their cultural practices in terms of how they dealt with wars. I know one thing that we always tend to find odd in modern times is this notion that they killed the babies in the rival town. Like in the case of Troy, I can't remember whose child it was on the top of my head, but I knew they threw a child, like the baby, over the wall.
Yeah, that was supposed to be Odysseus.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the reason that people do that, like in other cultures, is because it was a common motif and a common occurrence where a child that once they found out that they were related to a town that got conquered, they would want to get honor back for their town. So they just said, well, let's play it safe and sorry and just kill the kid.
Yeah, it's kind of what the movie did. It kind of demythologized the whole Iliad and Odyssey and kind of portrayed it the way it, quote unquote, really happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Although I don't think we'll ever know how it really happened.
No, probably the Mycenaeans and the Philistines were involved, but we don't really know. But not like the Ten Commandments, which is one of the best movies ever made. It just didn't happen that way.
Yeah, but you gotta love Charlton Heston. You gotta love him.
Yeah, Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner.
Yeah. I mean, not as good as Soylent Green. Soylent Green was good.
Yeah.
I remember I actually put a video up on my own channel going over a sort of misconceptions that even I had about the Canaanites and with Frank Turek and many apologists say about them. And I actually used John Walton where John Walton actually goes about misconceptions about the Canaanites, where Christians like to go through the whole universalism motif, where it was common back then for them to use universalist language when doing wars. I wiped them all out.
Yeah,
they're all dead. And then you wonder, the next book they're fighting them again. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. Like the Merneptah stele in Egypt is one of those examples where he goes through and he says, I conquered them, I wiped out these people. He even mentions Israel. Israel's seed is not, what? No, this did not happen. But yeah, you're right. It's this exaggeration. You know,
there's exaggerations.
I remember, but here's the funny thing about that is like Christians will take that example, but they won't think about the other motif, the invincible barbarian motif.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. That's a very prominent one. Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll completely ignore that so they can demonize the Canaanites.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But they forget that it was a very common motif back then to paint your enemy as the worst possible people possible. Make them seem uncultured and everything like that.
Yeah, well, you see these etiologies all over the place in the Hebrew Bible, especially the Book of Genesis. Whether it's like the curse on Canaan, the son of Ham,
yeah,
or the children of Lot and his two daughters, which is Moab and Ammon, I believe.
That's just obviously propaganda.
Exactly, yeah, it's political propaganda, and oh, man, the guy you need to talk to about that is Mira Scriptura. I don't know if you've ever encountered him on Twitter. He's been off for a while. He's got some things going on, but man, he does mirror reading with the Bible, and man, he picks up on that political stuff real quick. He picks it up and he can elucidate it, and it's absolutely fascinating.
And this is also a problem for fundagelicals when they read Joshua and Judges, because they're both each telling the different versions of Israelite origins. Like in Joshua, it's a compression of loosely connected events and illustrates one swift invasion of Canaan, and that's it. But then in Judges, you'll find out there's still Canaanites around, even though the Book of Joshua said wipe out all the Canaanites.
Yeah, the Book of Judges, I think, starts out like like completely a complete 180, like as if Joshua never happened. Even though this is in the same vein of literature, this Deuteronomic literature, it's like, oh, nothing. We didn't wipe out anybody. We still got to fight. What? Did you not just read the previous book?
and
you killed everybody.
And Judges kind of expands the situation to 300 years, because that would be the time that Egypt would have dominated Canaan, and if we're to take Judges, it would probably take place in less than 100 years up until David's time, since the collapse of the Bronze Age.
Yeah, they would have been right on the cusp there. Yeah.
Oh, well, speaking of Bronze Age, how do you feel like, being an expert and obviously a fairy tale ancient Bronze Age goat herder book?
Well, number one, I'm not an expert, but man, I'm so sick of seeing that. Ugh.
You're more of an expert on the Bible than Carrier is.
Well, I don't know about that either, but I'm just trying to be nice.
His PhD. Anyway,
those Bronze Age goes. Anytime I see that meme or see that referred to, I'm thinking, you really don't know anything about the Bible, do you? Like, you have zero knowledge about when it was written, by whom it was written. Oh,
especially when they compare it to Harry fucking Potter and Lord of the Rings and Twilight and the superhero comic books. Like, that's just beyond asinine.
Yeah. Well, I think Lord of the Rings fights are more entertaining, in my opinion. Although, I actually do believe Tolkien actually used the Old Testament a bit to model some of the battles in there. Although I could be wrong with that. I know he did pull a lot of biblical elements.
You're roboting.
Oh.
Anyway, Lord of the Rings was supposed to be an imagined past before civilization. Like the Return of the King ended right around just before civilization as we know it began 6,000 years ago.
Interesting. I've read the books. I just didn't know all that. Yeah.
What's funny is another funny misconception I often hear is on Atheist Republic, where it says, where they'll make fun of Moses for wandering the desert for 40 years. I'm like, for one, even taking this young Earth creationist literally, Moses and his people were nomads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, they lived everywhere, anywhere they could go to. So, the fact they may have stopped some time to settle down is not really unheard of. But two, 40, is a very numerological number.
Exactly.
And thirdly, it was implied elsewhere that it was their punishment because they were cowards for not entering the land right away. They made all these excuses like there's giants over there, we're not going to go and get our asses kicked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another. Yeah, you're right.
So I mean, it was always just funny how I often hear those misconceptions.
And one more historical kernel to that is the idea that the mana, which is this sugary, sweet white stuff that comes out of this insect named after it. I forgot the name of it. I can't remember the name of it, but they live somewhere out there and chew on bark on trees, and they spew out this sugary, white, sweet stuff that Bedouins today use for sweeteners.
Interesting, huh? Yeah, I didn't know that either. So I know I think the word mana means something like what is it? I think the text itself gives that kind of explanation. What is it? Which is a good question. But if you don't know what it is, do you really want to be eating it? Like school cafeteria mystery meat. I don't know. That's okay. No, thank you.
And then after all those years, like, we're sick of this stuff. We need some meat. We need more meat.
Yeah, can you blame them for being sick and tired of eating that mess? Man, unless you're used to. Oof.
I remember it was funny because, like, I actually made the joke about it, where God killed the people for manna, and I was saying, wait, if God would kill people for manna, then what would He do for a Klondike bar?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you also blame Moses for getting angry all the time because there's always constant complaining for all those years if they did travel that many years?
Oh yeah. They're a stiff-necked people, he would say. Yeah, oh yeah. I can understand that.
I mean,
Can you not go one day without complaining?
It's hot. He's been on his feet all day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could imagine like it's something like this. If I believe he even told them to shut up while he was crossing more or less told them to shut up while he was crossing the Dead Seas, and it was sort of funny like that because I could have like. This is how you know that even Moses couldn't stand his own people at times.
Yeah.
It's like, I imagine somewhere in his mind he was going to say, you know what? I'm thinking about just bringing you back to Egypt.
Yeah, as the meekest man on all the earth, he sometimes had a very hot temper.
And you also see that one special Battles BC where they go through all these different battles before Christ, and one of them was they tried to hypothesize that Moses and the Israelites, or Canaanite Hebrews, we should call them, in Egypt were Habiru, this warrior class, and it doesn't seem to add up.
Yeah, I don't think very few people hold to that hypothesis these days. It was in vogue probably maybe 40, 50 years ago, I think, but virtually nobody I know holds to that view anymore. I mean, but it's interesting.
I know a common theme that I often hear other atheists go into. It's the same thing that fundamentalists, funny enough, do, is where they take Levitical laws and they take just generally the laws in the Old Testament as just plain out wooden literal laws, even though a lot of them, at least in like Leviticus, were they think of them as penal codes, when in reality they were more educational treaties.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing is a lot of these laws seem to have been written, or at least compiled together, after the temple was already destroyed.
Yeah, it's thought that Leviticus was written during the exile, while Deuteronomy was written during the Josiah's time. Deuteronomy was set up to hold the Israelites strong in their resistance to the Assyrian Empire. Like, come on, man up, stop being pussies. Your loyalty is towards God, not these thugs.
Yeah. No, that's probably right. But yeah, Levitical laws are especially for atheists. They're easy picking because some of them do on the face of them they sound very ridiculous. Don't eat this food, don't eat that food, you can't wear this, you can't do this on this day, and but they have in the context in which they were written, they have a certain significance that needs to be understood and appreciated.
We do actually know that the kosher diet is actually pretty healthy.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'd be interested to see the research on that.
I'm still eating crap.
The diet was a lot less. Well, I would say it's probably less unhealthy than our current diet is.
Oh yeah. Well, of course. Yeah. I mean, if you eat hamburgers every day with that's not as healthy as just eating. I don't know.
I mean,
I'm more of a pizza guy.
I like pizza every once in a while. Is
True.
that culture? I guess is pepperoni culture? No, that's pork. So yeah, no, you can't have that.
So, wait. So, I think you had some more questions, Engine.
Yeah, but one more about the Exodus. Like one more defeater for the mythicists, as we call them. We should call them that, but in the idea that it didn't happen, like you don't make up a story like that. Your culture was your origin story is that you were slaves, and you were just so weak and pathetic that it took a god to save you.
Well, I don't know about that.
We don't see other cultures making themselves look weak like that.
Well, no, but
at the time.
No, well, you're right about that, but the Exodus story is kind of a mixed bag because,
right.
as we talked about before, they inflated their numbers. They wanted to look big.
Right, it's exaggerated, like the Trojan War.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
what we would call historicized, not historic. It's a mythologized history, not historicized myth, as Christ mythers like to.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, while you do have this aspect of we're slaves, we're stuck in Egypt, you also have this almost like a counter narrative where it's like, but we vastly outnumber the Egyptians because God has blessed us. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not convinced that a culture wouldn't make up a story like that. It's possible that they wouldn't have, and that it reflects some kind of historical core. I'd have to think on that some more. I've heard that argument before, and it's not really convinced me.
Well, I mean, it does have an underdog narrative into it.
Oh yeah, without a doubt it does. But I'm just saying that there's also this counter narrative that goes along with that underdog, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. So I think as historical data, it's kind of iffy, as a defeater against any kind of idea that the Exodus didn't happen. I think it could run both ways. So,
what do you love most about the Bible and your favorite books in it?
Oh yeah, well, my favorite book is of course the Gospel of Mark. I just think Mark he's an amazing storyteller. He's awkward at times, which I like because I can be very awkward at times. But just the way he frames stories, man. Well, for example, the story of John the Baptist being beheaded. Okay, right before that, Jesus commissions the disciples to go out and to perform miracles, and to cast out demons. So you have this image of the disciples being commissioned by the Messiah to go out and perform all these great feats. And so what does Herod do? Well, Herod hears what's going on, and he thinks John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. And then you're like, wait a minute, John the Baptist raised from the dead? What happened? And then Mark's like, oh, well, let me tell you a story. And he tells a story about John the Baptist and Herod and how Herodias conspired to get him killed. And so, either way, I say all that to just say that Mark has this way of in making his narrative themes fit, and it all points to what he wants you to think about Jesus. And so Herod is this king, even though he wasn't a king. He was a tetrarch. But Mark calls him a king. But Mark doesn't call him a king because Mark's an idiot, because he doesn't realize Herod's not a real king. He calls him a king because he's trying to deliberately contrast the terrible man Herod with Jesus the Messiah. But what he does is he doesn't just say, Herod is this, he said Herod's this man, he can order men to be killed and beheaded. But look at Jesus. Jesus is going to end up in the same boat as John does. He's not going to be beheaded, but he's going to be crucified. This is the way of Jesus. This is how the Messiah is going to be. Not a conquering Messiah, but a suffering Messiah. And it just things like that where he builds the contrast and intercalation where he inserts these stories in between two larger stories and things like that. It absolutely fascinates me.
And there's also the depiction of Pilate as reluctant as to hand him over.
Yeah, exactly. He's, and Mark does that because he wants to kind of emphasize how terrible the Jewish religious authorities were. And later gospel, like Matthew makes it real bad, it's just, Pilate's just like, his wife has a dream, says don't do it, he's innocent, and Pilate's really reluctant to do it, and he washes his hand of the whole affair. He's, Matthew's trying to say, oh, the Romans aren't to blame. It's really, the Jews, the religious Jews, the Pharisees that were behind it all. But yeah, so.
Yeah, and the way Matthew illustrates, that's why the book is first, because it bridges the Old Testament and the New Testament while comparing Jesus as to Moses and presenting him as the new Moses.
Yeah, well, it's also first because early Christians thought that Matthew was the first of the canonical Gospels to have been written. So that's another reason it's first in the New Testament canon. But yeah, it does. It certainly does. You see those motifs in Matthew all the time where he cites Scripture and fulfillment of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I actually do. Like if I had to pick my favorite book, I've said it before, but I pick Ecclesiastes is probably my favorite book.
Yeah.
You're an existential nihilist.
Yeah. And, if you want to be an existential nihilist, Ecclesiastes is the book you have to fall back on.
My favorite's Genesis because it has the most content and spans the most time.
Yeah.
It has so much packed into it, whereas you have 4 books dedicated on Moses' story alone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Genesis is an account that you can read it and you can always learn something new about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Like we told a Heiser that we could have days or weeks having conversations about Genesis.
Oh, yeah, easily. Yeah. It's just a lot. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, I like Ecclesiastes because it's sort of the opposite of what you would really find in, like you would think a religious book would have. Because you would think, when you think of a religious book, you think it's all happy, it's all, telling of how good humans are and how everything is just going to go so swell for them. And like, you read Ecclesiastes and they're like, that just punches you right in the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be forgotten when you die. What is life? It's meaningless. Ooh.
It's also like Job as well. That's also why I like Job as well, because it's sort of, you get this contrast between like what you would expect from a book like that and what you actually get.
You saw scholar fiction butchering the hell out of that.
I have not gotten into that. I'm very hesitant to. I saw Chris.
He's basically a poor man's Hovind.
Yeah, and that. Yeah, I'd have to look at it. I'm hoping Dr. Bowen kind of edges him back, but again, I haven't watched the videos. I've seen where Chris posted on the Inspiring Philosophy's blog, and then Chris also wrote a little book. I just bought it the other day, which is an introduction to the Book of Job.
Oh yeah, and you also contributed to Chris's book against refuting R. and Ron Nelson.
Yeah, I wrote the afterword, and Michael Jones wrote the preface to it. Yeah,
because most most things, if not literally everything he says outside of biology, is wrong.
Yeah, there's. I was looking through his book, Foundational Falsehoods of
Creation, yeah.
Creationism, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
he quotes Ehrman, he quotes some other, and I'm just like, what are you? No, he at one point talks about Ehrman says something about the Book of John and how it presents Jesus as divine, and um, and then he says something like, with all due respect to Dr. Ehrman, a lot of scholars don't think this is. He goes off on something, trying to make Ehrman say something he wasn't about Jesus, like as if Ehrman was saying Jesus really was divine, and Bart Ehrman would never say that. He would never say that. But the way Aaron Ra made it out to be, it sounded like he really thought this was the case. I don't know. It's frustrating to read.
Anyway, how do you
It's like
plan?
he has
How do you plan?
one job he's really good at, and that's teaching evolution and bashing younger creationists.
Yes, yeah.
If he just stuck to that, he'd be great.
Give credit where it's due.
Yeah, if I needed somebody who, I needed to break down something on, family trees and stuff like that, he'd be the guy to go to. But for the Bible, nope.
How do you plan on spreading cultural awareness of the Bible towards your fellow non-believers and push back the propaganda that's been plaguing their movement for so long?
Yeah. Well, mostly I do it through the website, amateurexegete.com, the podcast. I try to, present. Well, the first season was incongruities in the Gospels, but just basically trying to get good information out there. Honestly, as of late, it gets real discouraging real fast, just because there's so much. It's like a deluge of, just crap, and you're one man standing in the garbage, and it's depressing, to be honest.
Thomason always give you material to work with.
Say what?
I said S.J. Thomason will always give you material to work with.
Yeah, I've man. Well, she's blocked me again. This is
she's a friend of ours, but we just don't agree with her on most things.
Yeah, I rarely agree with her on anything. Although I have defended her. There's some people on Twitter that have said some terrible things about her.
I know, it's just uncalled for, absolutely vile people.
I mean, I've had some choice things to say about her, and I will continue, and I would do it to her face too.
Yeah, but
some of the other things they say are just, they're ad hominem, and they're. Yeah. I just don't see the value in it.
According to her, you're scum of the earth, a drain on humanity.
Yeah. I mean, to her credit, though, I think she apologized for that, but it was almost like an apology under pressure. It was very much in the vein of a politician,
We like SJ, but the hate she just gets is just uncalled for.
Yeah, and some of it she dishes out herself. Like she invites it, but I mean, I'm with Jesus. Turn the other cheek, or. Yeah. When he was reviled, he did not revile again, and I think that's a good way to be. So,
well, as long as you remember that the behemoth is a dinosaur and a dinosaur is he.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah. Ken Ham said so I guess it's true.
Well, I mean, I actually do hate Ben Stanhope for that video, because now I got that behemoth is a dinosaur song stuck in my head.
Oh my god, it took me hours to get that out of my head. Let's sing about the Bible and open up the book of Job. It's so fucking bad.
Yeah, that's when he just wants to say, I hate you so much for introducing you to that.
Oh man.
The hour mark.
That environment, that culture is just so off-putting. I can't even.
It's bad. It's. My wife was floored because she grew up a Baptist, and I grew up a Baptist. But when I told her that I believe there was dinosaurs on the ark, she was like, "What?"
No.
Where? We were never taught this growing up, I was like, yeah.
Leviathan was the personification of watery chaos, and Behemoth was the personification of all land creatures.
Yeah, well, these are cosmic. These are probably cosmic beings that God has either subdued because He's created them, or in some versions, like in Isaiah, there's this idea that he conquered them. They're this like you said, Leviathan was this watery chaos that at the creation God conquers in some iterations. Not the whole. The Bible doesn't completely agree on that. There's some texts that don't agree on that, but yeah.
Well, we've passed the hour mark. Do you either one of you have any final words?
Any final? Is this Jerry Springer show? Is this?
It can be.
Here are my final thoughts. Yeah.
Jerry.
Yeah. No, I just well, thank you guys for having me on here. I appreciate that. But to any people that are watching, read the Bible. Read it critically. Read it religiously if that's your thing. But always read it with an eye for how its original audience would have understood it, and how what the meaning of the text was at that time. If you want to apply it to today, that's great, but just don't do it at the expense of the original context. And if you're an atheist, read the Bible more than once. Good Lord, read it more than once.
All right. What's the name of your blog?
Yeah, so
can find you.
Yeah, so just go to www.amateurexegete.com. That's all one word, Amateur Exegete, and you'll find the website. There's a link to the podcast. I have a YouTube channel. I don't do a whole lot on there. I hope to change that, but that's there as well. So,
all right, follow them on Twitter also. The amateur is up, and amateur hour is up, and we will see you next time.